See, as I was like thinking about what we're going to talk about today and finding the arguments around the stuff we're going to talk about with adoption and Bethany Christian Services, like I think the thing that kept coming up for me is like, how can a church decide that adhering to a kind of doctrinal purity is more important than a child having a loving home? And like, what does that reveal about what Bethany Christian Services actually believes about the people they call the least of these?
You ask how? I would say the same way that they can say this group of people shouldn't be allowed to have kids, but these people should be forced to against their will if they conceive. It's all the same. None of it makes any sense. That's how.
Because they also say that if you don't follow doctrinal purity, then you don't get to have salvation and relationship with God. So they're all about boundaries.
Oh my God, that's not what I would call them.
That's not. I know,
crazy.
policing boundaries.
Not healthy boundaries, but like building walls.
Boundaries.
Yeah, 100%.
Instead of setting tables.
Wow.
They're about keeping people apart and keeping people out instead of bringing people together.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what their theology is founded on.
True.
Which
crazy.
I always ask
Crazy.
how, where, why, how do we get here? How?
That's what we're going to talk about. So I guess let's get to it.
Strap in.
Greetings and welcome to the Progressive Christians podcast. We are the love your neighbor kind of Christians and not the kind who make you sign a statement of faith to listen to or watch our podcast.
We believe that loving your neighbor, seeking justice, questioning power, and welcoming those who have been outcast are not the result of political compromise or a watered-down faith. In each episode, we show you that the progressive Christian tradition is the ancient tradition. Progressive Christianity isn't new. It's 2,000 years old.
So if you're someone who grew up in the church and something started feeling wrong, like the faith you were handed and the Jesus you read about just didn't match up, you're in the right place.
If you left the church and you're not sure that you can go back, but some part of you just isn't ready to let go of the whole thing, you're in the right place.
And if you've never set foot in a church in your life, but you believe that loving your neighbor is actually the whole point, you're especially in the right place.
Yes, this is definitely the right place for you if you actually want to learn how to love your neighbor. My name is Reverend Dr. Christopher Carter, and I am your host today, and I'm delighted to be joined by the entire crew.
Rev Blair.
Everest.
Julia.
And Wesley.
Woot woot.
Woo, woo. Yeah, we're trying to intro to see how it works.
I really like that intro. It made me feel warm and fuzzy.
Aww.
Yeah, thank you. I've been working. Had a couple of, as soon as I get a little bit of time off, I got to fill it with work because I have a psychological problem. That's another podcast. But as you heard in the open here today, we're going to be discussing Bethany Christian Services changing their policies regarding LGBTQ couples who want to be foster parents to adopt, and even people who work for them who are queer, and just kind of sidelining them and tying that into another decision that's being wrestled with within the Supreme Court around children with disabilities and just how we want to interpret the American with Disabilities Act. All these things really fit together, but we want to start with the issues of adoption. But before we get into that, we also want to invite you to be a supporter of the Progressive Christians podcast. If you are interested in how progressive social values and Christian theology intersect, and if you're tired of the kind of simplistic theological discourse where people just quote the Bible and then dehumanize anyone who doesn't agree with them, then we would love for you to support our work. You can find a link to make a tax-deductible donation in our show notes, and your support helps us reach people who are looking for Christian community before they get sucked into like something like a Christian nationalist pipeline. So thanks for your support. And actually real quick, shout outs to like, we have some amazing like listeners and commenters on our Spotify and our YouTube. Like I know I'm going to mess up the name because I'm just trying to do it off the top of my head. And I think that one of them, or maybe even both of them, are from the UK. So Julia, we're going to have to like figure out something.
Ooh,
I don't know.
Meet up.
I know.
That's not
The
volunteer Julia for
ambassador.
things.
Yeah. I don't know. We need to have like live from Progressive Christians live from London at some point. So I think that would be awesome. But yeah, just I was going through our comments trying to get an idea of like who our listeners were, and that's when I realized, oh wow, there's some people who comment on every episode. So thank you. Y'all are just thank you for your support and for your love and for helping us. Yeah, that's who it is, Spencer. Thorlayana. Am I saying that right?
It's like
It's
a
in the show
username. It
notes.
could be anything.
I know. I know. It's probably like something. I'm like, I'm sorry because they comment on everything, and I'm in here butchering their name. But just know that I love you, and I'm sorry I'm making this mistake with your name. So please forgive me. As I said, today's episode, we are talking about like a really important issue. That's I guess I should foreground this by saying this is actually really personal for me. So I have an adopted sister. My wife's father was adopted. My sister works for a foster care agency. She's a director, and she has an adopted daughter. So I have a niece that is adopted. Adoption has been a really big part of my family's history because one of the things about the background I grew up in and taking the Bible seriously, that notion about taking care of orphans just really mattered to us. And so I guess I should be clear and frame that this is one of the reasons why I want to talk about this, because in reading it, it made me just weep. So right now, there's only 57 licensed foster care homes for every 100 kids who need one, right? So like there's 57. And I think that's the thing for me that's just wild, because essentially, even with that information, Bethany Christian Services is one of the nation's largest foster care agencies in the country. I think it's the largest Protestant Christian foster care agency in the country. Decided that doctrinal alignment should determine who is exactly allowed to be a foster parent. They decided that like signing a statement of faith was more important than the number of children without a home. And this is a pivot for them, because in 2021 they made the decision to actually serve LGBTQ plus foster and adoptive families, and this was like it was a big deal at the time. But I think one thing I learned in preparing for this episode was like this decision wasn't made because they had a shift in belief. It was like practical. They were being sued, and they were going to lose government contracts because it's publicly funded, which we're going to get to in the back part of this podcast, in Philadelphia and in Michigan. And so that's what really, I think, from reading the tea leaves and the information, made them change their initial policies. And so this is more of a revert back to who they've always been. And they're making staff members sign a like statement of belief that takes effect in June 2027. And basically the statement of belief says that a marriage is between one man and one woman. And their stated rationale, the reason why they're saying they're doing this is because it said, quote, faithfulness to God's word must remain central to our mission. And so that's the setup. I just want to pause here and give y'all space to say the things that initially came up as I sent you these articles to read, just kind of what came up for you.
This requirement that people sign what we call a kind of the shorthand is a traditional marriage clause in religious nonprofit work is actually incredibly common. I made a commitment when I decided to go into the academy that I would not work at a school that requires me to sign a traditional marriage clause, which makes it hard to get a job, because I would say more Christian-based nonprofit institutions have this requirement in the United States than don't have this. And it's just another example of how just a couple of little verses read out of context have blocked out a huge population of people from participating in really good, really healthy, really gospel-centered work, like foster care, like housing development, like teaching and instruction and education, like name all of the good things that Christ calls us to do. There are nonprofits that are doing it, but because they make their employees sign this traditional marriage clause, it locks people out. And often it doesn't impact services, but in this case, it significantly does impact services. And I know we're going to talk about that too.
I was perusing the thing, and I think it's my favorite one, authority of Scripture. While
we're gonna get to it. We're gonna get to it. We gotta get to it. I'm telling you, because I know. So like, man, we're gonna just hold it. It is it's to Biller's point, and to both Julie, what you're saying about authority of scripture. Like there's one comment I think that made me laugh. I was the episode we did, Blair, last week around about the SBC banning women, and one of the commenters said he said, "Not me over here constantly air quoting Paul when talking about these epistles." Basically, just like obviously like Paul, and like it's just like, and it's
meaning
funny
that Paul probably didn't write them.
Write them, yeah.
So there we have
Air quotes.
authentic Paul text that we believe Paul actually wrote, and then we have a lot of Pauline texts that are in the style of Paul, but probably not
Exactly.
written by Paul. And that's one of those things that, like, if you don't know any better, if you don't study the Bible, if you don't do context and history, you don't know what's authentic and what's in the style of.
So again, this gets to what you just said around how we read the Bible, Julia, about what authority and weight you give to certain things. But Wesley, Everest, what came up for y'all? I guess as y'all were looking at these documents.
Well, I was gonna say, does anyone like? I feel like if you are giving scripture ultimate authority, you don't care who wrote what. Like, would it actually impact people to know that those letters are not written by Paul when they are canonically in scripture? Because I feel like the thing that I hear is that what matters is that it's in the canon, and the canon was selected with divine guidance. And
most of those people don't know that the Catholics and the Protestants have different canons.
Yep.
So whose Bible is correct?
And they don't know that the Orthodox has a different canon. And that
no,
the canon
I disagree.
Has
I think that they do know. They just think,
oh, really?
I'm going to school.
Oh, okay. Now tell me.
No,
because you are going to school. Some
what
of
are
these
the young
people.
ones saying?
He's literally in school.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a thing that they discuss, but they think that they are right.
And that the Catholic canon and the Orthodox canon are incorrect.
Correct. They think that they are right.
Even though they're older than the Protestant canon.
Yeah.
I don't think that matters.
So did the church have it wrong for like 1,000 years?
Yes.
And then Protestant men got it right in Europe?
Yes. And Revelation has come and God continues to reveal God's self in their minds, himself. And then
let's make a new canon, guys.
And it was never used.
I love that idea.
God is continuing to reveal God's self.
But it's only real authority when God reveals what I agree with.
And it has to be communicated through men.
This is the bone that I constantly pick, to which people are like, well, Julia, then they'll name some early church father and be like, he was very close with a sister. And I'm like, okay. It makes me fight.
I do have a proposal based on what Everest said, because I know the Edict of Milan was drafted in Milan. So if we're willing to go to Milan, I am more than willing.
Oh, is this the key? We just have to have a summit in Italy and then we can make a new canon? I mean, I'm going to Rome in a couple of weeks. We could all go.
See?
Mamma mia. It's time for a new canon.
All right. So tell us how this is impacting foster care, Dr. Carter.
Oh, I think that what people tend to not know about foster care is that it is overwhelmingly both underfunded, and there aren't nearly as many homes and spaces for children to be. And this is particularly important for LGBTQ children. But so as I said, there's over 325,000 children in the foster care system, and there's only 57 licensed homes for every 100. But what's really, I think, what became evident for me in the Julia, I'm thinking of the name of the foster care agency that is in LA, Covenant House. When we went to visit Covenant House, that's when you realize that so many people that are there that are in foster care that got kicked out of their homes is because they're queer. And so LGBT...
Covenant House is a young adult transitional housing shelter
for people
they're
who
not
work.
So a lot of the people that are staying there are graduated from
foster
They've
care
aged out of foster
system.
care,
Yeah.
and then
And
they
they're
have nowhere
adults.
to go. Yeah.
But some of them were like, as I was listening to their stories, that's what helped me understand like how hard it was for them to get, all the other things, right? It's all the other. I guess that's what I should say. That's what helped me understand this was a specific problem with this particular community. So the thing that a lot of people don't know with respect to like the data um, in about youth and foster systems is that while there are 325,000 children in foster care, like queer youth are overrepresented in the foster care system, and so that's one issue. And then you have the other issue is that like LGBTQ people are 2.83 times more likely than heterosexual people to seek to adopt. And so like what you have is like this tension that Bethany actually I think is both exposing and then showing that they're really not going to meet this need, right? That you have um, a system where you have an overrepresentation of queer youth, and you have people who are LGBTQ either plus or affirming and want to adopt, and basically you're saying these two people can't like meet with each other because under their new policies, youth in their care will only be placed in non-affirming homes because any foster parent has to sign that statement of belief.
I will say, I think maybe you are underestimating the sneakiness of queer people. I think that there are queer people that
Preach.
would continue to sign those agreements. I mean,
Absolutely.
I've signed one of those agreements in my
100%.
life, and I just was like, ah, ha, ha, I don't believe this at all. You guys are clowns. And so I think, yes, it's really disturbing to have to make that choice. And I know that foster care agencies do investigate you. And so I know that there's a higher risk. And I also hope that there will still be some queer foster parents that are able to do that. Because queer people are sneaky and like don't care when you make them sign something. They're like, girl, I'm still queer. I don't know what.
But they'll have to be
Uh,
single.
Yeah,
Right.
I
So
think even
Your
this
couples
like
will not be able to participate.
Okay. Yeah.
couples can't participate, and I think even saying that I think it's not even sneaky, it's resistance, right? Like they're resisting the system, right? So I don't want to even use the language to make it sound like they're doing anything wrong. But Everest, to your point, I think that's for me is that you because of the foster care system and the way they have to evaluate your house and those other kinds of things, like it's so much work. I know it was for us, like with my sister, and so I just feel like that's just an additional burden, and that if you're willing to take it to, play the game, that's great, but you shouldn't have to, and that's kind of the point, right? You have this need, and then you have people who are just choosing to use religion as a buffer to not even to basically just disregard the need, which is just sad.
It also makes me sad because I feel like queer people that are seeking to adopt want to be parents more than controversial statement, but I would say more than a lot of straight couples that just kind of have a baby.
You're not wrong, Everest. There's no test for giving.
I'm like, there's no test.
creating a
People are
human.
just popping them out, and I feel like queer people that are ready to be foster parents are really thinking about what that will mean, and really wanting to open their home. And also, most queer people are aware of the large number of queer youth in foster care, and I think that often draws them to it more. I don't know. So I think it breaks my heart for a lot of reasons, but especially because there's a huge group of people that really, really want to be parents in very intentional ways.
And Dr. Carter, you named at the top that part of your family story is that your faith encouraged your family to be part of the foster and adoption system to care for orphans. I think an interesting point in the evaluation of current foster care and then Bethany's choice to require this is not just the way that it impacts queer families and queer people and queer kids, but also the fact that 30%, people who have no religious affiliation are 30% more likely to adopt than evangelical Protestants. So you've not only made the pool an already too small pool smaller by excluding queer people, you've also made it smaller by excluding people who just don't want to sign a statement of faith.
And I think that's the crazy part is they shrink the pool, and then the release that they had, the press release, they said that, oh, we think that evangelical
Playing to
Christians
their
or
base.
people will step up and they will start fill in the gap. And there's no, you can just say something without any evidence, without any data, without
There's
any
no evidence of
proof
that.
there isn't. There's evidence to the contrary. That's the point. Like the
But
evidence
these are the same
actually
people
says
that
the
don't care
opposite.
about any evidence in any. They just don't care about evidence.
But
Alternative
I've
path.
never heard any evangelical messaging around foster care. Like, I've never encountered in my deep dives into random evangelical communities an evangelical pastor being like, guys,
Go
we
out and
should really
adopt,
be
yeah.
fostering, go out and adopt.
No,
It's
they're
much
telling them
more-
to
the
get married
culture
and
is
have
like,
babies.
have more
100%.
of your own children, create more children within this community.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what do you
Well, and
want? Literally, what do you want?
And there are racial disparities in
100%.
in the foster care system as well. And like the majority of kids who are in the foster care system are not white. And the other problem is a lot of conservative white people don't really have any desire to parent people that aren't white. Allegedly.
Go ahead, Wesley. You can say.
No, allegedly always kills me. No, I think it's just always frustrating that like these communities that are like fundamentalist and like have this like full quiver have to like build an army for God, like that it's only biological children that they sort of bring into that community. Not that I would want foster kids who are already like going through so much to have to deal with fundamentalist Christianity. That sounds awful. But it is striking that, as Everest was saying, that there isn't really a call in Christianity to adopt like as a consistent beat in the same way that there is a consistent beat in evangelical Christianity against women in leadership, against queer people in any form, in any community. So it's just so crazy that this is we're once again moving in a direction that is like making it more legal to discriminate. And how conservative Christians just continue to hide against legalities left and right.
I also was going to say, except for World Vision, I feel like there is a call to adopt the orphan in a abstract, sponsor a small black child from another country that will have no impact on you.
Okay, but there actually was a big push in the 90s for evangelical Christians to adopt internationally. So this was actually a really big Christian conservative like talking point and sort of status symbol, was if you were able to adopt a child from overseas.
Asia.
And it caused people to change the laws. So it is harder to do an international adoption in most of Asia and much of the African continent now, because there were so many white evangelical missionaries trying to take orphaned, sometimes they weren't orphaned, but trying to take kids home with them as sort of a status symbol. And so that fell off in the 90s. And then in the early 2000s, as the laws began to change, because the push to adopt, if you couldn't have the status symbol of it being a child from overseas, then, oh, no, you just have to adopt a black or brown child from here in the United States. And that's not a status symbol.
So chic, huh?
And racism won. So the big push to be participants in the foster care and adoption system kind of tapered off in the evangelical conversation. So it's all tied. Of course, it goes back to patriarchy and racism, but all the things
Of course.
go back to patriarchy and racism.
And I also feel like it has so much to do with children's rights. And like it connects to me to, the right to life. You're going to fight for the baby before it's born. Then once it's born, it's on its own. Once it's born, who cares? It's nobody's problem. You got to figure it out. If, God forbid, any of these parents who are Christian have queer kids of their own, can we guarantee that they won't kick them out as well? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, there's a film that one of my friends produced several years ago. Oh God, it's almost like 10 years because what is time? Called Lost in America, that follows queer homeless youth. And they talk about how in a lot, like one of the biggest problems that the majority of homeless teenagers are queer, and there is no place for them to go because a lot of the shelters and the organizations and the NGOs that work with unhoused youths have these like morality clauses for the people that they allow in. So if you're queer, you're not allowed to get assistance, or the government won't even give grants to these organizations that are trying to help house children because they think that they're somehow sinful, ? I don't know.
The thing that really frustrates me about this whole thing is that, like, in a way, it's crazy that the state has abdicated the responsibility to care for minors in such a profound way, and by extension, because we are the people who elect our leaders, who advocate for these things. We've abdicated our responsibility to our neighbors, and it's like the amount of times I hear politicians say, "Oh, we're gonna bring in the nonprofits to do X and Y and Z." It's like, but the state has the capacity. We just continue to choose not to do the things that would encourage human flourishing, like through these mechanisms of the state mechanisms, the federal mechanisms. Because we leave it to these nonprofits, then we have to have these conversations about, does it fit with their morality clause? Right. Like, whatever it is, it's just so infuriating.
And a significant number of kids end up in foster care
100%.
Because their parents can't afford to care for them. So then we pay strangers to care for them, and then run them through this whole morality clause, yada, yada, yada. We create a system where people make money on kids whose
selling
parents,
children.
If we just given the parents the money in the first place, everyone would have stayed together.
Or allowed them to not be pregnant if they didn't want to be pregnant.
Exactly.
But then we can't shame them. we can't feel better about ourselves. Then we can't feel better about ourselves, lording our moral superiority over to them.
But in a nation where the number one cause of death for children is gun violence, I guess I shouldn't be surprised that no one really cares if a large percentage of them literally don't have a home, or what. We don't care. Like, like how many of them are starving now? Cut their SNAP, let them starve. Like, I don't know. I guess, it all goes together. It makes sense.
I mean, it does. And I think that in a terrible way, it all goes together and makes sense. I think the one thing I want to say, and I want to get to the statement of faith, is I do know that there are, I guess, speaking from my sister's experience in North Carolina, there is this like undercurrent of people who are trying to make arguments around the theological argument to adopt and foster. And she's not in evangelical space, but she's certainly not in a progressive space. And there's like a people who are willing to hear it, but not necessarily people who are willing to participate, if that's a better way to say. And I think it that proves the point that we're talking about, actually. And I think there's reasons for that. Maybe we can get that to the back end of the podcast if we need to. But I think, generally speaking, there isn't a movement to help. And I think, Wesley, your point that you raised is if this should be an issue of the state. But so I want to get to the belief statement, because for me, this is the like Blair said, like, this is something I've had to encounter, and I've never had to sign one. I wouldn't sign one because I think it is this shouldn't be the criteria by which I work for you. Especially when I think that it's so theologically inconsistent. So I guess, to be fair, because I'm an ethicist, and I'm like, well, I read the statement and I was like, well, I should at least say that one thing I think I can agree with in this statement. Well, there's a few things, but then what they applied is messed up. But the thing I think, broadly speaking, most Christians would agree with is the Apostles' Creed. So it starts with that. Like, this is what we believe. This is the Apostles' Creed. And I'm sure all of you are either familiar with it, or we can put a link to it in the show notes. Most Christians would be okay with signing that, even if you don't necessarily believe in, like, do I believe in a virgin birth? Do I, all that other kind of stuff. Like, it's traditional Orthodox belief. I think that's fine. Wesley probably wouldn't sign it, but
I mean, if it meant that I could then adopt, I'd sign it. I don't care about lying to an organization that's hateful. No, I'm saying in the situation where that's a thing.
Wait, I just didn't
would not
know.
mind signing
I'd
be like, whatever.
Basically, Wesley would take care of the kids. That's what he's saying.
Exactly.
He wants all of the children.
Oh my God!
I don't want any of them, but if I had to, I would sign the paper. Is what I'm saying.
Now, let's get to things we don't agree with. And Julia, this is where I'll say this. I'll get over to you because you already started a little bit. How they talk about the authority of Scripture. So in the paragraph itself, it says so the document, like, it affirms that the Bible is inspired, infallible, and authoritative. But then literally in the very same paragraph, like a few words later, it says, quote, "We recognize that Christians across denominations may interpret it differently."
I read it like 6 times but so yes, but no. We recognize that Christians across denominations may interpret differently. Okay. But they can't come? They can't sit with us? Like, what do you mean? I don't understand why they would even tag that at the end. Because you might recognize it, but you don't care. You don't respect it.
That's it.
Just don't say it then. Why? Oh, these people.
Well, because they don't want to block out Protestants who are against queer marriage, but are also not biblical literalists. They're trying to skate the line to make sure that they keep some of the Protestants involved in this activity without alienating them, and only kick out the ones that they think are really problematic.
Why wouldn't you just put what you think?
Oh, because if you do that, then you can't be so obvious, right? You have to be more, and I do think that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to be subtle, because it's just the way I think people can try to pretend they're not doing something racist or sexist or queerphobic or anything, right? They don't want to do it directly.
Which means that they know that they are.
Yeah, 100%. Like 100%. They know, it's because there is a lack of honesty. And Julia, the point you raised is a point that stood out to me. You can't have that sentence. Those two things are contradiction in terms. You can't say the Bible is infallible and then go and say, but people interpret it differently. Because, like, which one is it, right? You can't say that people can interpret it differently and then use Scripture as a standard by which you require people to either be employed or be able to adopt children. Like, the two things are contradictory, and it's just so obvious. And I think the part that I think is really, I don't know. I haven't read anything about this. It's just something that stood out to me, and probably because it's pride, and my brain is just thinking about this in terms of it's super anti-trans, right? There's a section.
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, it says
God's
like,
reflection in humanity.
Yeah, that's
where they do the same thing. The same thing. They say one thing, and then they double back and say the opposite thing.
Well, let's read it for the audience. God's reflection in humanity. We believe every person is created in the image of God and therefore possesses inherent dignity, worth, and purpose. Great. I'm on board so far. We further believe God creates human beings in his image as male and female as determined by biological sex.
Kill me.
How'd you
careen off so sideways there?
How did you get there?
But I also want to point out, this is where, like, the fear-mongering and the propaganda is so harmful, because I keep thinking about how many people that just don't know any trans people, or don't think they know any trans people, or don't think they know any queer people, genuinely just believe that they are predators and pedophiles. And I think the argument of, like, this is ultimately to protect the children beyond even an ideological, like, not only that they will hypothetically, if they're adopted by queer parents, not be raised in a household of faith, but that they also could be, like, victims of those parents. Obviously, I think that's disgusting and very, very untrue, but it also makes me sad thinking about, like, the justification for this being effective because of how well messaging has been done about queer people being predatory.
To clarify what you just said, Everest, it's not just that you think this isn't true. Data also supports that.
That's what I was going to say.
Not true.
It's not true. It's just
not
literally
true.
not true.
The most dangerous person demographically for children to be around is a straight white man.
Yep.
Talk about it, Blair.
I
I also
was gonna say most dangerous person for all of us to be around, but continue.
Hey.
That's so true.
Hey, it's better when Blair says it.
Except for Blair's part, right?
Pick the bear every time.
There's a handful. So here's a question. They always quote They always quote Genesis 1:27. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. I don't understand what the argument is. Is the argument that that's all that's listed and that Genesis only describes what God created? Is that the argument?
There was no trans person in the Garden of Eden.
Because I don't understand, because also it doesn't say that God created alligators and squirrels, and yet I know for certain that they exist.
That is the argument they make. And also, if you translate the Hebrew accurately, it doesn't say God created them, he created them. It says we created them in our image, male and female, we created them. Elohim, it uses a plural. So God is a multiple. And also, you're right, it doesn't say that God created dusk or dawn. Does that mean they don't exist? So does that mean nothing in between the absolute binaries exists in our world? We know they do. So that can apply to gender too.
I think too, the frustration part for me, and this is a little window into the sermon on Sunday. I am so angry that there's such a focus on the creation narratives, rather than actually looking at not only the direction and arc of the Gospels, but then how we read things are supposed to come to an end and fulfillment and conclusion. Whether you're looking at the prophetic literature in Jeremiah and Isaiah, or even Revelation, at the end, quote unquote, the direction we're supposed to be heading is where all people come together, where all people are seen and loved for their inherent worth and dignity, where all people are able to see themselves as beloved. So you see this direction, right, that is profoundly inclusive. But there's this focus on the beginning rather than on the end, in this more inclusive space that we're supposed to be moving towards. And even that, we know, is a contradiction in how they're interpreting it. So the thing for me is, like, there are trans kids that are in their space. They're already there, right? Like, this is already like basically trying to say, you can't on one hand say there's inherent dignity, but then just say, well, who these children understand themselves to be actually doesn't actually exist. I want to pretend and erase them, right? That's denying the dignity that they actually inherently have in how they see themselves and understand themselves to be in the world. Like, that's the fundamental contradiction, as I understand it. Like, you can't say, you can't just say, well, we're not going to classify you as who you understand yourself to be, and then say this person has inherent dignity. And so this, and we can wrap up by just talking about the part they have about marriage, because this is where they say marriage is between, what does it say? Quote, it says, we affirm the biblical design of marriage as a covenant between one man and one woman established by God to reflect, quote, his love and faithfulness. This covenant reflects Christ's love and provides a stable and nurturing environment for children. So basically, this is the core of their argument that disqualifies LGBTQ plus foster parents.
The Bible doesn't clarify marriages between one man and one woman.
There's this great old YouTube video of this woman talking about the different models of marriage, where it's like, marriage is between one man and one woman and his concubine. Marriage is between one man, one woman, her sister, and 3 concubines. Marriage is between one man, one woman, and 26 wives and 500 concubines. Like, this idea that the Bible only represents marriages between one man and one woman is only possible if you've only read the New Testament, and even then, it's like you're really cherry picking to pull that out.
It's questionable. Well, it's so interesting because they cite Genesis 2:24, which also is not even clear about what they said. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. That doesn't say anything. I don't understand. That doesn't say anything about any other marriage. I don't understand why that's. I I don't understand. Can anyone explain to me how this makes sense in these people's minds? Good luck.
I
mean,
don't know that I can do that for you, no. Because I think the
no.
thing that comes to me in sort of this time is that they start with, we believe God designed the family as the primary structure for love, care, and human flourishing. And then they go on to like not really say, and family means, I mean, what they're doing is saying family means one man, one woman, when family is a much more expansive sort of definition of what of what a structure is, and therefore then where love, care, and human flourishing can come from. But it's this thing where they do like, well, this is marriage, and then they'll use a scripture like Genesis 2:24 that, I guess, if you squint, you can say that's marriage, but like the text doesn't say that. And so like even their own like process by which they get there is like text first doesn't do that, but it's just what like evangelical Christianity does, makes a belief a statement and then uses scriptures that might fit, and then as a lay person you're like, okay, yeah, I see that.
Oh, because the
What is
belief
that
comes
authority?
first.
Yeah.
The belief comes first. But okay, guys, stop me if this is like theologically inaccurate, but I also think it's really interesting to say that marriage between one man and one woman is a reflection of Christ's love, when our actual stories about Jesus in my head are following much more of like a chosen family dynamic
Absolutely.
and a very unconventional family structure. This guy was traveling around with his besties and like spreading love openly, and as far as we know, did not in
Get
the
married?
biblical canon get married or have children. I'm
Yeah.
just
No, I think
Yeah.
I think
Yes,
Megan
but
makes
because
sense.
he was a male, only men can be pastors. It's like,
Oh my
when
God, you're
is
so
Jesus,
right.
when
You're
is
so
how
right.
Jesus does it the model that we have to abide by, and
It
when is it
hasn't.
not?
yeah.
Is it only when it's convenient
When
for
it's
what you already
convenient.
think?
Mm-hmm.
Aw.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think this is where it's so important that the point you just raised, all of y'all, but Evers, especially what you just said, they're basically trying to make this like a theological claim, a really specific theological claim, by arguing that like the structure of a man and a woman in the marriage provides, I think that's what they say, provides a stable and nurturing environment for children. And so like that's actually like an empirical claim that they're trying to make theological, right? And we know that's not true. Like we know that like the evidence doesn't support that. Like we know that the data says that children that are raised in same-sex households, like they're just as well adjusted as kids in heterosexual families. And so like one of the essays I sent y'all has a quote from a young woman in there who was raised in that space, and she talks about like love being love, and the most important part about her experience of being fostered to adopt was being in a place where she felt loved, and she said it saved her life. And so this is the frustrating part for me, is the whole document like basically it's just an internal contradiction. Like you can't say like we like accept we think people have inherent dignity, except for not these people. We want to help orphans, except for you have to do it within this narrow framework that we have. Like basically because like these things are just in contradictory tension. And so this was to me is it's just a bunch of theological incoherence. And as y'all just said, like the coherence for them is when it aligns with what they believe. That's the coherence. And if it doesn't do that, then they're trying to shift and change and do everything else. And so ultimately that's the most frustrating part of what we see taking place right now. And Blair, this is where I see the Olmstead piece tying in, right? Where coherence is around like aligning with a particular belief, not with a particular belief that allows you to maintain power, not with statements and values and virtues that you claim to have, but if you implemented them morally consistently, would democratize power, as all y'all just said, right? That Jesus was trying to do, democratizing family, democratizing community, democratizing power. And so, so Blair, can you talk a little bit about the other case, and then we can talk about at least how this ties together, at least in our mind.
I think Julia had one more thought she wanted to toss in.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, it might all go together, but I had never looked at this Genesis 2:24. And it is finally I understand this Western idea of a nuclear family being a husband and a wife, because I guess I never really noticed or like saw, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother. Like I didn't, like they mean like leave, like they mean like like asunder, like a separation to go be another family. That's how these people understand it. Not like that getting married is an expansion of family, but that it is like leaving a family and starting a new one.
And again, like they're using that one verse without looking at the broad, not only frame in which you can interpret it, but also just the application just in the rest of Genesis, right? Like literally, and so that's again, it's we've talked about this so much. I don't even know what to do.
I
next.
hadn't thought about it like that.
Even then, Julia, that statement in a nomadic society makes a lot more sense than in an agrarian society. Because in an agrarian society, you need as many people as you can to work the farm and live close together. If you're in a nomadic society, as soon as you are old enough to go start your own community, you go do that, because moving with this many people is difficult. So when you're moving around from place to place in a nomadic herding society, the smaller your group, the easier it is to move and stay away from danger. When you're an agrarian society, the better it is for the community to be large. So again, even that statement to like leave their father and mother is because of the economic structure that existed at the time that rule was created.
Blair,
and that doesn't apply to us anymore.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. So yeah.
One more scriptural reference that I think helps us transition to is the other scripture they name is Matthew 19, 4-6, which is where the Pharisees come to Jesus and basically say, hey, can we divorce our wives? And Jesus repeats back to them this passage from Genesis about the Creator made them male and female, and for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. Let no one separate. And so they're asking, like, why is it then that Moses let us get divorced? And Jesus is like, because y'all had broken hearts and you were being mean to your wives, so it was better to let them get divorced. But you shouldn't get divorced, and if you don't get divorced, it is better for you not to marry at all. And Jesus is like, yeah, that is better to just not marry at all. So again, just confirms this idea that like there is no one model of marriage in the Bible. To chosen family, there is actually a model of Jesus encouraging that in John 19, 26-27, when Jesus is on the cross. He sees his mother and he sees the disciple whom he loved, which we think is like his favorite disciple, and basically says to you, woman, where is your son? And says, here is your mother. And basically says to his mom and his best friend, like, you go together now. You are family. You will take care of one another. And that was both an act he was doing to make sure his mother was taken care of as a widow and now without a son to take care of her. But that is also like against necessarily the like laws of the culture of the time. You didn't have to take in a widow, but he's saying be responsible for one another.
And it's for his friend, right? Like, so he can actually, I mean, like it's, and this is why I think, Everest, to your point, and I mean, all of y'all said this in different ways, but for me, personally, taking the time to even just have an hour, which with the queer group, like doing Bible study, just was like, oh wow, I should probably do this at least once a month, because like this is fundamentally different eyes reading the text, and you just don't see things that are obviously there. And so you can make a good argument that the whole Bible is about found family. Like literally it's about found family.
Well, Jesus has an adoptive father. Yeah. I don't know why we haven't said that, but I'm like, Jesus is kind of God's foster child. He gets to be raised by a new God's birth son, Joseph's foster son.
Exactly.
I'm making the argument. We heard it here first.
All right.
I second
and
that.
Again, that's our interpretation. So naming that is our interpretation. But that hermeneutic helps us see how broken this Bethany interpretation and so many who hold to this strict understanding of what marriage and family is supposed to be.
100%.
So we wanted to talk to you in this sort of conversation about family and how families are structured and who gets to decide, about a shift in law for disabled people that overwhelmingly affects children, but also adults too. Wesley, you said you might like to see the state actually take care of minors, and I'm not sure that I would like to see the state take care of minors, but I'll get to
Only because the state has been chronically underfunded and does not have the resources that it should have to properly care and educate the children across the state.
Agreed. So recently, the Department of Justice made a ruling against the existing standing decision in a court case called Olmstead v. LC, which is a decision that said people with disabilities have the right to receive care and inclusion in their local communities rather than being segregated in institutions. It was a civil rights ruling, basically saying if the only reason you would separate a person from their community is because they have a disability, that's not a good enough reason. And what this did was open the door for publicly funded, state-funded in-home care and community care for people with disabilities. This is what also opened up the pathway for IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which allowed kids with disabilities to stay in what we call the least restrictive environment for their learning. So by overturning Olmstead, or basically saying they're not going to uphold Olmstead anymore, this is opening the door for a reinstitutionalization of people with disabilities rather than continuing to pay for the support that they need to stay in their homes, in their schools, in their workplace, as they are currently have the right to do. And this is even more concerning for me as the mom of a kid with autism, because RFK Jr. made a statement earlier this year that kids with disabilities or mental health concerns should be reparented on wellness farms. And this man also is about to take over the Department of Education's responsibility to oversee the care and education of kids with disabilities in the local school system. So he's about to have a list of every child with an IEP or a 504 plan, which are supports in schools. He thinks those kids should be sent to wellness farms, big air quotes. And they've just overturned the right of parents to legally argue for their children to stay at home with them. And I am terrified for what that could mean.
Because historically it's meant taking away children from homes where they clearly are loved and cared for, but they need additional funding, right? We talked about this earlier, right? With respect to how our system is set up. Like, this was a product of a long dismantling. Like, we had systems in place to care, publicly funded systems and systems designed to help parents who want to keep their children. And, really escalated with Reagan in California. And then when Reagan was president, and I know I blame Reagan for lots of things, but I just feel like it's
rightfully so, though.
I mean,
rightfully
exactly. So. And so, Blair, to your point, like, it is scary because they are, you can see how this could get implemented in public schools and just so many spaces where, like, you don't allow children to flourish their capacity. And to be honest, like, this is where the United States is actually far ahead of other countries. Like, Europe in many places do not have anything as strong as the American with Disability. Yeah, they just don't. And so, and I think it's just the argument that they're doing. I mean, they're trying to go back on just years of precedent, right? A rightful interpretation, and they know it. They know that they have to do something. They're typically conservative legal theories say something crazy and get something less, but you keep saying the crazy thing, it'll inch forward. And so we have to, like, resist, like, this kind of encroachment on the rights. And I think I can't remember who said it. Wesley, may have been you. That it's the rights of children, and they don't think children have rights. They think children only have rights within the framework of parental control rather than their actual selves. They say, well, they're kids, so they don't really know what they want. No, like, evolutionarily, these are not even children most of the time, right? Like, we have to grant them a degree of love to actually trust their own judgment and nurture it and ask appropriate questions and try to help them be more mature, rather than just assuming that they don't know what they want or know who they are or know what they need to flourish. And that kind of, I think that kind of paternalistic behavior really speaks more to the way in which people look at children as products that they own rather than human beings that you're trying to raise to be whole, healthy people in the world.
I think that for me, the thing that is like doubly scary is that this happening under a quote unquote competent conservative administration would be scary because it is a rollback of these children's rights. This happening under this specific administration, an administration that has shown that they don't care about human rights, that they don't care how they treat people that are in their custody, that they don't track, that they will dump people on the side of the street. Like all this
That they'll kill them.
lack of care being subjected upon kids is like is just like it just portends something very terrible. And that's where we're at because of where this administration is.
Well, and when you think about it, that these types of governments always target the most vulnerable, and children are, especially disabled children, it's like a hat on a hat on a hat. Like the most vulnerable of the most vulnerable is like, it's not lost on me that, you know, the Department of Labor is also partnering with the Department of Education. That like when you think about what things used to be like for children 150 years ago and how they used to live and what the way that now, especially the conservative right, couches it as parental rights and completely that those should override children's individual rights, when you know that for a large percentage of our economic history, right, capitalistic history, that children were a major part of the workforce, and that children, people who were disabled were just like, since they weren't able to be as productive, were considered essentially worthless. Children don't pay taxes. Like children aren't consumers. Like all of these things, it's like, again, it all just goes together. Like
actually,
it all just
right. Both of these things connect to capitalism and the capitalist construction and control of what a family should or should not look like. So RFK saying that kids with autism won't have jobs, won't contribute to society, won't pay taxes. He also, these wellness farms, the claim he made was in reference to Black children, particularly he said, every Black kid is now just standard put on Adderall, SSRIs, benzos, which are known to induce violence. Those kids are going to have a chance to go somewhere and get reparented and live in a community, supposedly. And it's couched under this idea of benevolence. And it's the same thing that they're doing with the Bethany rules, that, these children deserve to be in stable homes. But when you reduce the number of in-home placements for foster kids, where do they end up in? Essentially institutions. So you're creating a whole generation of unstable kids that are going to end up acting out of survival. And then where do they end up? Corporate-run prisons. And then we're just creating a whole generation of population of people to be enslaved because that's the only legal way in our society to impose slavery still.
And I think the only thing I disagree with is that you said that it is under the guise of benevolence. I disagree. I think that
they're trying. They're not succeeding.
No, because he's saying he's talking about reparenting. He's talking to white people about the dangers of Black kids because they're not parented well and how they need. That's not under the guise of benevolence. That's him just being racist and saying the real problem with our society is that Black people need to be reparented. And he's saying this to white people and they're lapping it up. Not all the white people, but the white people he's talking to that are sitting in the audience believing the crazy things he says, even though he has a brain worm.
And there's too many of them. I mean, I think the thing that both of these things to me, or this conversation and this whole reality that we're existing in, remind me of is that, like, under a Republican administration, under this specific Republican administration, like Christians who hold the beliefs that are similar to them, to conservative Christians, they've been given the permission to be their worst selves. And so many of them are taking it.
I think Wesley's right. And I think as hard as I try to tap into whatever might be justifying all of these different decisions, I think the place that's the hardest for me to do is when it involves children, and especially children with extra struggles or children that don't have anywhere to go. And I might have shared this on here before, but I have 3 cousins that have been adopted from the foster care system. I have another cousin that is currently being fostered. I've wanted to be a foster parent my whole life. I've done a lot of work with different varieties of neurodivergent kids and kids with disabilities, and I think it just really hurts my heart. Like, that is the group of people that I feel the most protective over and the most love for, and the highest obligation to protect and to open my heart to as much as possible. And I think as much as we make silly jokes, this actually is just deeply heartbreaking to me. And I hope that it fortifies our motivation to look out for them as much as we can. But I think it feels like a really big challenge to be up against.
Well, I know, Julia, I know you got to run. So just thanks for. We had to cut it close, but I just want to say
I get
thanks
to
for
skip the
being
good
on.
news, so I hope
You
it's
do,
good.
but we'll see. It will be good. We'll see. We'll see you next week, and we'll wrap up.
All right, friends. Bye.
Before we go to good news, too, I just want to say we're not helpless against these things.
Exactly.
Because the key to resisting these things, as always, is community and reducing barriers and building bigger tables. And so engage in chosen family, get to know your neighbors, build relationships that are intergenerational, get to know families with kids. If you have the capacity and the resources, consider becoming a foster parent, because that is, I think, especially if you're a person of faith, a clarion call that we hear: the widow, the stranger, the orphan. Like, let's get together as a community and support foster kids. If you can't bring them into your home, how can you get engaged with a foster care organization and support particularly youth in foster care who are most at risk of ending up homeless when they exit the system? And you can call your local representatives and your national representatives and tell them to push back on this Olmstead decision. This is based on a court case, but a law could be written to institute this protection for disabled people to remain in their communities in situations of mutual care. So we're not hopeless and we're not helpless. We can choose to enact a different kind of way of being in the world. We don't have to succumb to these pressures nationally, because we have the possibility to share love with one another where we are, in our own homes, in our own spaces.
Blair, I think for me, that's like the crucial aspect in the West. You're talking about this as well. Like, there are things we can do, right? And I think that we have to recognize. One thing we can do is, like, I would really love for progressive congregations and churches to take seriously, like, having conversations around foster to adopt and becoming a foster family. And I know we try to do that in the loft, and that's not always an easy conversation for have, because I think it brings stuff up for people. And I think that, I know for me, talking about it personally, because it's not only my own family experience, but something Gabrielle and I have discussed numerous occasions, because we know it's important. I think that's the way you can begin to, like, dismantle some of these systems and make sure that, in so doing, like, partnering with an LGBTQ affirming, like, agency, because there are LGBTQ affirming agencies. I think the hard part for so many people who are doing it from a theological perspective is that most of the Christian agencies are not. And that's the thing that sucks. But what I guess the last thing I'll say is, I wonder to what extent we can, like, a part of me wants to tell people to, like, argue against Bethany getting any public funding. And I don't know, that might be difficult right now because of the way things are set up. But, like, that's what has to happen for me. It's like, you got to make sure they shouldn't be getting any government money if they're, like, discriminating. Like, discrimination cannot be
Agreed.
legal. And so, like,
Agreed.
that to me is, like, what has to happen. That to me is, like, you got to make a consequence so that then it makes these people have to think like, okay, if you want to do this, fine. And then raise your own money. You know what I'm saying? It limits the harm they can do. Hopefully that funding can go to someone else. So the good news I wanted to share first was just everything that's happening right now in this country has turned into a little bit of a party. So the New York Knicks won the NBA championship, and because they were like a long-suffering franchise, there's just celebrations erupting all over New York. And at the same time that was happening, you had the World Cup taking place in New York, New Jersey. And New York seems to be like the only city that could actually have that many people and actually have a giant party and like pretty much everything be okay. And I just felt like what's been crazy. So Blair and I were at this conference in La Quinta, and I was at the bar watching.
I was there too.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, sorry, yeah, sorry. Because I mentioned it last week. I apologize. Wesley was not there though. Wesley was not there. So
Thank God.
me and Blair and Everest were at this conference, and I was at the bar watching the United States play Australia, and just the like energy and the camaraderie, like the genuine like connection that people are feeling, like
Sports ball gives us collective effervescence.
I was like, holy! I mean, I've had collective. This was like, but so much so that it literally trumps what's happening right now in the world. It was. I was talking to random people, having good conversations about like family stuff, and I don't know what their political beliefs were, right? But the willingness to have those conversations opened up because we're in this space of just joy and cheering and high-fiving. And I just thought, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what the country could be. Like, what would it be like if we had public spaces where we could get together and do stuff and just like actually create community where we're just like this is why you had public pools. I mean, you had these things that were just public. It was so I just want to get y'all thoughts about just the stuff that's happening with the energy and the collective effervescence we're seeing happen because of the World Cup and then because of the Knicks.
I mean, it's like it's what could happen if we didn't exist in a country that chose violence when it dealt with international relationships.
Ooh.
The
That's
people
fair.
the
Preach,
people
Wesley.
can rejoice and celebrate with one another. But these systems of greed, the systems of corporate power, of militarization, of resource extraction, they prevent individual people from seeing the joy in each other, from seeing the love in each other. But no, it's particularly striking because we're in this time of like genocide, of wars, but we're still finding and able to find these moments of joy because they're there and a better world is possible.
I think that's what I was left with. I was like, man, this is like, yeah, that better world is possible, and just that energy and that joy was amazing. So, anywho, the other piece of good news that I'll say before we wrap up is there's a new study that shows that coral reefs in some places might be more resilient to climate change than we originally thought. Researchers identified more than 64,000 square miles of coral reefs across 71 countries and 100 territories with the potential to survive warming oceans, which offers additional avenues for reef conservation. Coral reefs are often framed as ecosystems beyond saving, said this study co-author Emily Darling, who is the director of coral conservation at the Wildlife Conservation Society. And this research shows like otherwise. And I think for us, the coral reefs.
That's not the gospel. Come on.
I know. It's just resilience, right? Resilience to be able to survive. And I think
the things we think that could not heal themselves have found a way to heal themselves. Like that,
Yep.
Friends, that's the gospel.
We can be wounded and resurrected. There we go. All right. Well, thank y'all for joining us for the Progressive Christians Podcast. The Progressive Christians Podcast is the ministry of The Loft, a worship community of Westwood United Methodist Church. If you would like to connect with us and be part of the conversation, you can find us on all social media platforms at The Progressive Christians. If you have any emails or have a show idea or request, leave a comment on YouTube, on Spotify, or send us an email at progressivechristians@theloftla.org. Our show is produced by amazing producer Spencer, and it's mixed and edited by wonderful audio engineer Sadi. Again, if you like the show, please rate, review, share, subscribe to us on whatever platform you are listening. And we will see y'all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.